Hello, everybody. I am Paige Bernier. Thank you for the wonderful introduction, Alice. I highly recommend submitting to the CFP for DevOpsDays Portland so you too can experience a lovely bio. I'm Paige Bernier, an SRE at Lightstep, and today I'm going to give you my talk, Best Vends, the how and why to befriend your vendors. I heard from Matt yesterday that it's not a DevOps talk unless we have cats, so I'd like to introduce you to Rocky and Norman, my two lovely cats. So, where did this talk come from? Why am I talking to you about this today? For the past few years, I started working at a monitoring vendor you may have heard of called New Relic, and then I started a job at a different company that was not in the monitoring space at all, it was in the design space, and we were a client of many monitoring vendors. I came back to my happy place in monitoring land working at Lightstep, but I really had a chance to look at the specific relationship between vendor and client from both sides. And it got me thinking, I know a lot about what vendors do for their customers, for their clients. They're writing blog posts, they're getting out there at conferences, they're talking to people. They're generally trying to do good things to get you to use their product and learn more about the new features. And on the client side, I realized we could take a little bit of effort and we could participate in this relationship a little bit more to have it blossom. And so that's really where this talk came from. What can we do, client side as the customers, to better have a relationship with our vendors and get more use out of the products that we're already paying for? All right, to get started with some definitions, when I'm talking about a vendor, I really thought about kind of SaaS-y modern tools, things that we interact with every day as a part maybe of an internal platform. Maybe it's your CI/CD pipelines, maybe it's your source control, but sort of internal tools. And then vendors that are under active development, that are pushing out new features, that are kind of continually growing their product and their platform. When I'm thinking about clients, that is you. If your customer, if your company is buying software from somebody else, whether you're an SRE, an engineer, a manager or a director, I consider you a client, and I think all of these things could apply to you. So, last little bit of housekeeping before we move on with the content are some disclaimers. Obviously, business relationships are not best friendships, and the metaphor does fray at the edges when we understand we're exchanging money for goods and services. We do not have vendors just out of the goodwill of our hearts, right? So just that is the general disclaimer, I'm aware of that. But I think it is still useful for this purpose. Secondly, not all vendors are created equal, and I would posit that not all vendors are worth the time and effort to invest in becoming best friends or growing your relationship with them. And the little snake emoji is there to say, like, sometimes I hear complaints that vendors are selling snake oil, and I'm not talking about those vendors. The vendors that I want you to invest your relationship in, we will define that below. So not all vendors, and yes, it's a business relationship that's kind of underlying the whole situation. Cool. In defense of vendors, I feel like I have to say this. Sometimes I think vendors can be a convenient dumping ground for criticism. They're this third party that we're paying. We have really high expectations that they're going to meet all of our needs all of the time and be super available for us. And they're just like this distinct kind of entity far away, and so we can kind of complain internally, or we have lots of frustrations, or we say their product is garbage, and generally not nice things you can read on the internet. And so I'd like to take a moment for empathy and acknowledgement, and I think this is the best crowd to kind of have this moment with. So, vendors are just like us. They have teams of product managers that are working really hard to bridge the gap between customer wants and customer needs, kind of listening to all of this product feedback. They have teams of customer success people whose jobs literally it is to make sure that you are fully enabled using their product and to keep track of what your experience is with it. You have teams of developers who are working really hard to build features and maintain what's out there and kind of build out the product. And of course, you have wonderful, beautiful, intelligent, charming, fantastic, the best people you'll ever meet, ops and SRE folks operating it all. So, when you go back to work, you can think of this handy little guide. Vendors, they're just like us. If you do not read celebrity gossip magazines, there is a frequently recurring column, stars, they're just like us, where stars do very mundane things like using baskets at the grocery store. And just think about vendors that way. Not aliens, just like us. They show up hard to do their job every day, just like us. Cool. So we're on board with humanizing vendors. That is good for the rest of the talk. Let's see, where do vendors fit into your system? This is a Keystone Arch. The keystone is kind of the last piece that is placed and kind of secures the whole thing. And so all of these supporting bricks I kind of think of as your internal platform, and these are all the kind of vendors that I think about. Of course, up top, my true love, monitoring. Right next to your amazing product supporting it. Of course, you're gonna have some sort of infrastructure layer, CI/CD, maybe you have a security scanner or source control. And I think this visual is really helpful to recognize just how important and how side-by-side vendor products fit in with some of your homegrown tools or the glue scripts that you have together, kind of keeping it all running. And I posit that vendors are secret teammates that you may not recognize or you may not acknowledge until now. If one of those bricks were to go away, the archway might crumble, and so obviously you've purchased their product because you're getting a good use out of it. And so I want you to start to think of vendors not only as humans, but as a part of your team. They're on your side. They are helping you with your ultimate business goal of getting whatever your product is out the door. So to orient us, I have developed this very scientific Bestfriendship Spectrum, and we will take a look at what this means for vendors next. So on the far side, I did not start with enemies because I don't think you typically do business with your enemies, and it seems like pretty negative for the talk. So the lowest we'll get is frenemies, and these are people that are just kind of friends of friends. You see them around town, and you generally just put not a lot of investment in that relationship. It's not one you're really keen to grow. Then in the middle, we kind of have this neutral zone of acquaintances where you're maybe putting a medium amount of effort into the relationship. You maybe see them at brunch and you're excited to catch up with what's new in their life, but it doesn't go beyond that. And finally, you have sort of the holy grail of best friends. And this is where you're putting a high investment into the relationship. It is a give and take, and you know what's new in their life. So when we look at this from a best friendship spectrum, let's start with frenemies. These are your vendors that don't quite meet your needs. Maybe you have had to write a lot of internal tooling or scripting around to fill in features that honestly should be there to support you, or perhaps you're of a company size that is not the key target for that vendor. There's kind of gonna be some inherent friction there if you're not exactly the type of customer they're building the product for. Frenemy vendors could be unreliable, having frequent outages, kind of not being there for you when you need them. They could be insecure, or generally just not responsive. They could be vendors that don't answer your support tickets for days, or leave your customer success requests kind of just out into the ether. They're generally just vendors that are around and you're not too keen to learn more about. In our acquaintances bucket, these are vendors that I think are tools that are more set it and forget it. You set it up once, it's working fine, the status quo is cool. You don't really feel like you need to invest more because you're getting what you need out of it, not actively engaged. And finally, best Vends. This is, like I mentioned before, it really is this give and take. You're telling them about your current challenges and your upcoming projects, and you're leaning on their expertise. And you're also taking the responsibility to keep up with the feature set and learn what's new with them, really sort of back and forth, actively participating in a relationship. So just to zoom in a little bit on best Vends, what does that look like? Participation on both sides. I can tell you, and we will go through many activities later, but vendors are doing a lot on their end to make sure that you can learn about the product, you can use it, there are tutorials, and that there are people on the inside advocating for you. And I think we have a little bit of responsibility as customers and clients to interface more and to do some activities. So at the end of the talk, I have a list of things that you can do to participate from lowest effort to highest effort. Two other things, two other qualities of best vendorship would be reactivity. That is, if you tell a vendor that you have a problem or you explain the impact of an outage, they should be reacting. They should be listening to that. They should be letting you know and keeping you updated about any remediation efforts or just generally assuring you that things are okay. They should be responding to your questions. And I would also say that a best friendship is proactive. If you've had a technical account manager that just really knows the landscape of your company and your architecture, they can help point you to features that are maybe underutilized by the product, by your company, or point you to new features that are coming out that are super applicable. So a best friendship means both people are participating, that the vendor and the client are both reactive and proactive to requests and feature requests and things like that. So I mentioned before that not every vendor is maybe worth the time and effort to invest in best friendship, and I think you need to be strategic. The two groups that I recommend kind of bolstering your relationship with are acquaintances, because these are the vendors that are status quo is okay. You already generally are on good terms with them, and if you put in a little bit of effort to learn what else is going on with them, it can really pay off. And you also already have sort of that positive impression of them. Somewhat controversially, would be trying to befriend the long-lived frenemies. There are certain vendors and tools that we may not be able to escape within the course of our careers. And if you've ever met anybody who's like a total whiz at Confluence or Jira, you know the power of befriending your long-lived frenemies. So those are the two groups I think you should target in order of importance. And I hear you. These are all things I said to myself in the course of writing this talk. I don't have time to keep up with the new features. I am trying to learn all of the other tools that I need for my job. I'm trying to keep up with doing a side project, and I get it. I definitely hear you, and that's why I have a couple of activities that are very low effort, very just do once in a while, check in, and that's a way to kind of maintain this. You don't have to do all the high effort activities. You can just generally keep a pulse on what vendors are up to. You may say, Paige, you work for a vendor, of course this is your take, and your skepticism may intensify, and that's totally fair. But I'd like you to take a moment to just think about what you could do, small steps, to improve this relationship and what the payoff could be for you. There are some activities that could personally benefit you, that could benefit the company, and I hope by the end you will be convinced, and if not, let's talk. So, the last kind of point of contention could be, I already know what I need to know about X vendor, and I think PagerDuty is a great example of this. We often walk into setups and rotations that have kind of existed for ages. Everything kind of is status quo. If you know how to go on and off call, and maybe more importantly, how to schedule overrides, what else do you need to know? And actually, PagerDuty's been up to some pretty cool things lately. They did a rebrand. They have this concept that's kind of been out for a while called business services, where you can kind of map the spaghetti mess of all your back-end systems to the actual customer product. So when an incident goes down, you don't say, service X is down and it's affecting maybe 10% of people. You can say, this product is degraded, and kind of speed up the whole process of notifying customers. So that's just kind of one example of a vendor that we could maybe take for granted that is actually continuing to do some cool stuff. So I do not have 5 whys for you, but I have 3, if you were not convinced by the 3 before. The big one, and sort of the big business case, is that you're maximizing money that's already spent. Your company already went through some lengthy process. If you've ever been involved with getting a new vendor on board, you know what I'm talking about. And they've chosen this vendor for some reason. You're already spending the money monthly or annually, and my theory is that if a vendor continues to add features, if you signed up originally and they had a feature set maybe this big, and then all of a sudden, a year later, they've added a whole new product or something else, or upgraded a lot of features, you're actually using less of what's available to you, and you're kind of like losing out on the benefits there. The second why is that by participating in a best friendship, you actually can influence the product. By using your voice and kind of making your needs and wants known, you can slowly and subtly influence the product that is shaped for your particular needs. And finally, you benefit from their expertise. You likely bought whatever tool that they're selling because you didn't want to have a team maintain something in-house, or you didn't want to write something. And these companies have people thinking about the specific problem that you're paying them for every single day in, day out. I show up to work, all my coworkers think about monitoring, distributed systems, and we're writing some really great content. So I think you should really leverage your vendors for the area that you're paying them for. Cool. I know what you're thinking. Paige, this sounds pretty cool. I definitely want to be best Vends right now. I understand the what, and I understand the why, but just give me how to do this. And that's what we're going to do. In sort of the style of instead of this, try this, I've got a few things in order of least effort to highest effort that you can do to get on the path of best Vendship. So, are you frequently upset with in-app pop-ups? I'm going to say that you should breathe and just click, because at worst, you will lose 5 minutes of your life going through a tutorial showing you a feature that maybe doesn't apply to you. But at best, you will have uncovered the greatest feature since sliced bread, or maybe something that will save you lots of time or can kill some in-house script that you wrote that you're not super confident in. So the payoff can be high for a pretty low effort activity. An example of this that made me super excited the other week, I clicked on the little red gift icon in Slack. They do have the least intrusive in-ad pop-ups, so thank you, Slack. And I was given the gift of the Google Calendar integration. And if you work remotely, I highly recommend installing this right now. It basically scans your Google Calendar, and when you're in a meeting, sets your Slack status, and when it's done, unsets it. This is incredible, so my coworkers know when I'm available and when I'm not, and I used to have to do that manually. Anyways, I was given a great gift. I will say, not always are you given a gift when you click on the email or you click on the pop-up, but just move on with your life because it really didn't take up that much of your time. Are you perhaps unsubscribing from all the vendor emails? Maybe you just don't like to get those. Maybe you already unsubscribed from them the first week on your job. Might I recommend labeling, filtering, and perusing them at your leisure? Basically, just make a folder in your email that says like vendor stuff, put everything in there, and in that really fun amount of time in between meetings, when you don't really want to start something new and lose all the context, just scan through the most recent ones. You don't need to be keeping up every month with what's coming out, but just generally take a temperature when it's convenient for you about what's new. You might find something that you want to investigate more, or again, you might just move on with your life because nothing applied and no harm, no foul. Are you perhaps skipping vendor blogs? Maybe you think it's all marketing material. You're totally wrong. I recommend that you soak up the wisdom and expertise that is there. Often there are really compelling case studies. There are white papers. There are general surveys of the industry and the community. And also, if you're buying this vendor's product because it's a need or an expertise that you don't have in-house, why not lean on them and learn what's new in maybe the security space or something? Do not take vendor blogs for granted. While not technically an example of a vendor blog, while I was procrastinating for this talk a few weeks back, read all of CircleCI's documentation to get up to speed. And they taught me something that is applicable outside of CircleCI, so thank you for that. They taught me about anchors and aliases within YAML to dry it up. And while that may not be exciting for you, because I think we all tend to rip on YAML a lot, it was a very exciting concept for me. And it's just one example of how vendor blogs or vendor content isn't always just trying to push you to their feature set. They can teach you things just generally about the technologies and languages that we choose to use on a daily basis. So, cool. If you are skepticism intensifying smiley face from earlier, I think this one is specifically for you. Write your own blog post. Try out a new feature. Try out an old feature, share your configuration files. How are you using this product? There are so many things that you can write about. And some people will take your opinion more seriously than the vendors, and that's fine. But know that by creating this organic content, you'll also make marketing and product teams super happy because we'll get that inside look into how people are actually trying to use the project and set things up. So write your own blog posts, personally beneficial. Maybe it makes it onto your company's blog. Maybe it even makes it onto the vendor's blog. Kind of cool. Are you, and I think we're probably all guilty of this, complainy pants about missing features, what we think are bad features, or just generally deficiencies in the product? I think a lot of times from what I've seen, we complain to ourselves, the poor unfortunate souls who sit next to us, or maybe even the team that owns that vendor management relationship. And by doing that, you are spreading your sadness to people who literally can't do anything about it. But what you can do is package up all of that feedback in a nice, constructive, positive way and make a feature request. This is definitely a little bit of a higher effort activity, but I think the payoff is great. It does not mean, of course, you submit the feature request, it gets in the next sprint, and boom, it goes to prod and everybody's happy. But what it does mean is your voice is being heard when it was not before. If you're not telling the vendor what you need and what's important to you, they will be listening to other people. So I think it's important, and one of those things that we do, that we should do, that we have the responsibility for, is to tell the vendors what we need and what is missing. Are you perhaps frustrated about a vendor's recent incident? And when we're talking about this class of vendors that make up our internal tool stack, if a vendor goes down, it can prevent our deploys or our rollbacks, or in the case of monitoring, your ability to know what your system's doing. It's pretty important stuff. I recommend articulating the impact that you personally had and sharing your tale with, I've abbreviated it CS, but your customer success rep. This is generally the person on the inside of the company who's keeping tabs on the account and what your experience is. I can say as an SRE, some of the most impactful moments and learning moments for me have been when I have heard the customer impact of an incident that I did not think had a wide impact. So maybe it affected a small percentage of customers, but I have a customer success individual who said, well, we weren't there for them when they were giving a big presentation in front of all of their staff. That's a pretty big impact moment, and now we're kind of tainted in this customer's eyes because we let them down in their crucial moment. So I think sharing the stories about the impact really helps the people on the inside who are maybe a couple layers removed really kind of humanize and understand what the impact of going down means. Do you keep your best friendship secrets? Maybe you already are best friends with a lot of people and you're just not letting the world know. I would say partner up for a case study. I think it's really great for you and your company to get that exposure, get your logo somewhere else, and it can also help the industry and our fellow companies make decisions about what vendors to go with. I think it's just super fun. So definitely reach out and do that. This is the biggest one. This would be probably the activity with the highest effort, but the highest payoff, and my personal favorite. Are you waiting for features to be GA'd or made generally available? Don't. Participate in betas. This takes a little bit of setup and time, and will obviously take a lot of your time, not only in getting things stood up on your end, but also having frequent meetings and check-ins. But there is no better time to make your voice heard the loudest than during a beta. You have a product manager who's actively seeking inputs and learning about the system constraints that you have and what you're looking for in your use cases. You have a team of engineers who are actively building out the thing, and if you are in a beta, you are the first customer that is getting to use this new system, and it is quite an exciting time. So you have a very powerful voice, and you get to kind of steer the product direction, hopefully more in your favor for your needs. In a personal story, I was on a team that was doing greenfield development, and truly, truly the best time was when we had our betas, we put it in the hands of customers, we watched them using it, misusing it in ways that we maybe didn't expect, but really keenly listened to them. And so I think if you do anything else besides click the Inapp pop-ups, try and reach out to whoever manages your vendor relationships or your customer success person and ask what's new in the company that you could get involved with. I really, really recommend this. So for a quick recap, vendors are humans and secret teammates you did not know about. To have a best friendship, it is a give and take on both sides. You might want to do this because it's maximizing money that you've already spent. You want to be strategic about pursuing your best friendship. Not everybody is deserving of your time and attention and loyalty. And there are many, many things you can do to get started today. So I hope that you are convinced, and this can be you, exchanging money for latency histograms about your services with your new best friend with sunshine and rainbows. Shout out to emojipedia.org for all the wonderful emojis. They are from the Google deck, in case you were interested. And thank you.